Happy New Year. I was just looking through this issue of Muppet magazine from 1988, and this was the Christmas edition. But it always makes me think of New Year's Eve because I guess Jason Bateman is wearing a tuxedo. But anyhow, it's very festive. It's kind of amazing. Jason Bateman was like 18 or 19 then. I don't think he's aged at all, except, of course, if you see him in Ozark. But he goes through a lot in that show. But New Year's, by definition, the beginning of a new year, makes me think of calendars. And calendars are a big thing, a very popular holiday gift. Maybe you even got one this year. There's all kinds of calendars. There's an uncountable number of them that have been published over the years. There's calendars for everything you can possibly think of. Any kind of sports, any kind of celebrity, movies, both classic and current, TV shows, both classic and current, from I Love Lucy to Seinfeld to Big Bang Theory to Peaky Blinders. Am I saying that right? I have no idea. Anyhow,
Peaky Blinders.
It's kind of a fun one to do. And of course, a long-standing tradition in calendars is celebrity models. Think of Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition, men reading books, or any kind of celebrity that has their own calendar. But it might interest you to know that it was a particular celebrity that started that whole trend. Who was that famous celebrated figure? Well, believe it or not, I've already given you a clue. But if you don't already know the answer, I will reveal it at the end of this video, so stay tuned. And speaking of this video, I thought today we would look at some calendars from my collection. Definitely an eclectic selection, but let's start with a real favorite, Disney. So here we have Disney animation art from 1984. One very interesting thing about this calendar is that it is a calendar version of this book. This was one of the very first of the Disney coffee table books, and there have been many, many similar books published in the years since this was published, I think, in 1981. Treasures of Disney Animation Art, really for just about the first time, went into the Animation Research Library and curated some wonderful backgrounds, story drawings, animation drawings, concept art, and certainly in this period, most of this had not been seen before. So this was a treasure trove. Best of all, the introduction was written by John Canemaker. Now, if you don't know who John Canemaker is, you should, because he is the leading authority on animation and has written a multitude of books over the years. Certainly his volume on the Disney story artists, on Disney concept artists, and on the 9 Old Men are must-haves for any Disney fan, any fan of film or cinema, or anybody that just likes to read good writing, because John is certainly one of the best. So John, I know you're watching, so thank you for all you've done and keep up the good work. But here was one of the first. And to get back to the whole idea of calendars, let's actually look at the calendar. So some really unique things here. Here's a background from Lonesome Ghosts. Did you ever think you would see that? Here's an elaborate inspirational sketch of the Rescue Aid Society from the Rescuers. Now, this is an earlier version where the agents of the Rescue Aid Society were going to try to help this poet escape from a communist country. And as you know, the movie ended up being quite a bit different than that. But certainly we can see the beginnings of the Rescue Aid Society and the delegates meeting here. But the great thing about it is this sketch is by Joe Rinaldi, who was a veteran Disney story artist, who was very influential in creating everything from Lady and the Tramp to Ludwig von Drake. So it's really wonderful to see this art by him. We also have such rarities as this inspirational sketch, or painting, I guess one would say, by Mel Shaw for The Black Cauldron. Since this was published in 1984, there have been hundreds of Disney calendars published. But at this point, let's turn to a Disney-owned property, Marvel, which has also had a good number of calendars published based on its characters and properties over the years, including some early ones in the 1970s that were very groundbreaking. But this one is Spider-Man Homecoming, and this is specifically based, of course, on the movie starring Tom Holland. So it's not just Spider-Man, it's about that particular version of the character, which, as we know, was sort of a reimagining. And I'm surprised I like it so much, being the purist I am. But here's Tom Holland as high school student Peter Parker, and it's very interesting because he's wearing his school sweatshirt, Midtown School of Science and Technology. Established 1962, it says. Now, you might ask yourself, why 1962 when really they could have picked any year? Well, it's a little bit of an Easter egg because, as you Spider-Man fans know, 1962 was the year that Spider-Man was introduced into Marvel Comics. Such a groundbreaking character. Here's Peter Parker's sort of homemade version of the spider suit. Another view of that 2 months in a row. And here's Tom Holland. You gotta love him.
I drink tea, darling.
So that calendar's from 2017. We're going to go back a few decades for this one. This is quite unusual, from 1976. We have the Worlds of Fantasy calendar. The idea of this calendar was a group of amazing artists would each illustrate a particular world of fantasy, whether one that was original or one that was famous from literature. So let's take a quick look inside. The very first one, January 1976, is that famous illustrator, Frank Frazetta, such a favorite of so many comic and fantasy fans. He did so much over the years. And this was a creation of his own, The Sea Witch. Here's the Jungle Book, based on the Kipling book, not the Disney film. An attempt to be very accurate to the Kipling book. And this is by Carol Binch. And each of the artists has a little biography here and then a kind of a little explanation or thought or insight on the art. Here we have The Once and Future King by Robin Laurie. And this is, of course, the story of Arthur as a boy, which was adapted by Walt Disney into The Sword and the Stone. And then, of course, we could not leave out The Wizard of Oz, this fascinating look at the various lands from the book by L. Frank Baum. So here we have the China Country, which is not in the famous Judy Garland film. And this imaginative art is by Pauline Ellison. And The Land of Oz, of course, does bring us to the MGM film starring Judy Garland. There have been a multitude of calendars inspired by and dedicated to that classic film over the years. This one was published by Hallmark from 1995, and we have all kinds of wonderful stills and images from the film done in sort of this scrapbook style, which I think is really fun. You probably know that this is a very rare still. For many years had only been published, I think, in Life magazine. It's wonderful to see it more well used. And of course, another property, if you will, that has been published many, many times in calendar form is Peanuts, starring, of course, Snoopy and Charlie Brown. This is one that focuses on Snoopy, and this is from 1997. This particular calendar was published by Determined Productions in San Francisco. Now, some of you will know that that company had a very great influence on the licensing and merchandising of Peanuts, and especially in the field of calendars. But we're going to get into all that in another video because that's a story unto itself. Now, I did promise to reveal to you the famous superstar who started this whole celebrity calendar trend that's still happening today. And you might have guessed, it's the great diva herself, no greater superstar than Miss Piggy. Now, this is actually her second calendar. But the calendar that was published in the year before, 1980, because this is from 1981, was such a smash hit and opened up the whole idea that a celebrity could have a calendar just devoted to her. It really opened up the floodgates that are still open to this day, especially since that first calendar just focused on Miss Piggy and all kinds of settings. The only theme was Miss Piggy and her glamorous life. For Christmas, she's listening to an album in front of a roaring fireplace. For 4th of July, she's costumed as sort of a Miss Liberty type character, and so on. But this is the second one, which was even more elaborate, and this one was called the Miss Piggy Cover Girl Fantasy Calendar 1981. The fantasy being that what would it be like if Miss Piggy was on the cover of 12 different famous magazines? It's really fun, and it comes in this box. And of course, you have to have the cardboard, the most important part. We want to be a completist as a we want to be a completist as a collector. And here's the cover. And we have such examples as Harper's Bazaar, perfect for Miss Piggy, posing in costumes. Here we have Life, supposedly from 1942, Miss Piggy entertaining the troops. Omni, the science magazine, Piggy in Space, and a really wonderful December image, the Saturday Evening Post, and Miss Piggy in a Merry Christmas scene, almost as if it were painted by Norman Rockwell. And throughout, one of the fun things is that Kermit makes sort of a cameo appearance, and you have to kind of look for him. He's almost sort of a hidden frog. He's not in every single one, I don't think, but he's usually in some form somewhere. And even on the back of the box, as I call it, we have the newsstand with these various magazines for sale, and who's at the newsstand? The Kermit himself, kind of partially hidden as he is throughout this calendar. So it's kind of a clue that you need to look for Kermit every month. Now, this whole concept was created by an artist who I've mentioned before, Michael K. Frith. He was the sort of creative director for Jim Henson Associates. Henson Associates, also known as HA! And Michael K. Frith was the greatest Muppet artist there ever has been, probably ever will be. And this was designed and directed by him. The photographers, Nancy Moran and Donnell Holloway, are all credited, as is Frank Oz, because he was instrumental in creating the character of Miss Piggy, as we know, inspired by the glamorous international superstar created by Frank Oz. This led to many more Miss Piggy calendars and calendars about the Muppets, but I think none have been so creative as the ones that were done in the 1980s, and I'm very lucky to have this one. Now, the calendar subject is such a rich one that we will definitely be revisiting it again in a future video, along with the Peanuts story, as I promised. But I hope you'll join us again next time, when we'll have as our special guests New Zealand, Uncle Deadly, and Sweetums to discuss the topic of felt versus plush. There is a difference. See you then.